There was a time when Muslims led the world in science, technology, philosophy, and education, known as the Islamic Golden Age, but somehow regressed back to the Dark Ages after its decline and eventual fall. Watch till the end as we find out how this happened and what was the cause for this collapse. While Europe was busy prosecuting the heretics, Baghdad became the intellectual center of the world. Under Abbasid Caliphate Harun al-Rashid, centers like the Bait al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, were found. The advances that unfolded in that time, in that place, included the invention of algebra, algorithm, both Arabic words. 2/3 of the stars in the sky that have names have Arabic names. Huge advances, not only in mathematics and astronomy, but engineering, physiology, navigation, and geography. Not only was it determined that the Earth was round, but they were also able to calculate the size of the Earth, the degrees of longitude and latitude of the Earth, to amazing accuracy, making some of the most accurate maps of the world at the time. How was this amazing advancement possible? Because they were open to all lines of thought. Jews, Christians, Muslims, even doubters, all sat at the same table and shared ideas. If someone had a theory, someone was going to find holes in it and challenge those theories, which resulted in conversations, ideas, and theories which ratchet up, they keep what works and discard the rest, leading to making rapid discoveries. Then how did it decline from such advancement, deteriorating to authoring works by well-known and established scholars saying that the Earth rested on top of a whale, and when the whale shook its head, the Earth would experience earthquakes. As late as the 19th century, Indian Imam Ahmad Raza Khan Barelvi, founder of the Sunni Barelvi sect, wrote a whole book called A Fair Success, Refuting Motion of the Earth. The Barelvi sect is still a major Sunni sect in the Indian subcontinent, and its followers are still being taught this till today. Under Khalifa al-Ma'mun, al-Mu'tasim, and al-Wathiq, the Mu'tazilah ideology was dominant, which emphasized God's oneness and justice, human free will, and the Quran's creation. While known for debating the Quran's creation, their greater impact was in critiquing Hadith. They believed the Prophet forbade writing Hadith beyond the Quran and viewed circulating Hadith as unreliable or fabricated. They distrusted Abu Huraira and criticized scholars who judged Hadith by the isnad rather than the content, rejecting any Hadith that contradicted the Quran. Their Quran-first approach encouraged scientific inquiry, as the Quran did not conflict with science and reason. However, Hadith often clashed with both, limiting its acceptance. For around 200 years after the Prophet's passing, the Quran was the sole source of religious law. Hadith, though circulating, was not considered a legitimate source of law, with no formal effort to document or preserve it. As documented in my first video on this channel, the Prophet forbade it, and the Khulafa burnt it. The earliest written Hadith collection is Malik ibn Anas's Al-Muwatta, with 1,720 narrations, out of which only 600 are attributed to the Prophet. At its release, most still saw the Quran as primary source of Islam. Over time, as Hadith sciences formalized, Muslims were increasingly pressured to accept Hadith, often justified by the Quran's call to obey God and His Messenger. This ideology of Hadith first, Quran second, really took shape during the Shafi school of thought, founded by al-Shafi'i, who argued that the Quran must be understood through Hadith. This practically placed the Hadith above the Quran. They also claimed that if a Hadith's chain was sound, then the Hadith was valid, no matter how absurd its content seemed. After the Shafi school of thought came the Hanbali, founded by Ahmad ibn Hanbal and built on al-Shafi'i's approach, insisting Hadith should override the Quran if authentic. They taught that Hadith outweighs reason, as the Prophet was infallible. Hanbalis focused solely on isnad reliability, holding that a sound chain guaranteed a sound Hadith, and even a flawed Hadith was preferable to a scholar's opinion. Eventually, this ideology became predominant and was eventually adopted by the 10th Abbasid Caliphate, al-Mutawakkil, who openly endorsed Hadith over Quran. His reign marked the formal endorsement of Sunni Orthodoxy over rationalist or philosophical interpretations. This included giving greater authority to Hadith scholars and scholars of fiqh. Motivated by political consolidation rather than theological, his support for the Ahl al-Hadith strengthened his legitimacy among the masses and clerical establishment, while curbing the influence of rationalist elites who could challenge his authority, reducing factionalism and promoting a unifying ideology. Thus, sacrificing the deen of Allah from the Quran for a man-made version of Islam of the Hadiths for political gains. Al-Mutawakkil and his successors violently persecuted any Muslims and non-Muslims they deemed unorthodox to their Sunni ideology. This included the top scholars of the House of Wisdom. For instance, Al-Kindi, the great philosopher and mathematician, was beaten and his library was temporarily confiscated and died, a lonely man in Baghdad, during the reign of Al-Mu'tamid. Eventually, whatever was left over of this golden era ended with the Mongol invasion of Baghdad. But Islamic civilization and culture did rise again several times later. However, this time around, science and engineering discoveries were not a part of it, because by now, Hadith and strict adherence to it had been codified. Open reasoning, conversation, and free thought were frowned upon, and doubters had no place in society. This shift in ideology pushed the Muslims from the most advanced, forward-thinking group of people back into the Dark Ages. As the Western world was having a reformist movement and getting free from its orthodoxy and experiencing a renaissance, the Muslim civilization was heading in the opposite direction, and unfortunately haven't recovered since, and we are still stuck in this rut until today. If you found this video informative, subscribe for more weekly videos like this. Thank you for watching.